folks. Welcome to the Future of Faith podcast. I'm Josh Packard, the co-founder of Future of Faith.
I'm Keedren Boston, ministry practitioner here at Future of Faith.
In each episode of this podcast, we're going to break down one key research finding from our brand new study about listening and faith formation. I'll give you the national perspective, trends and insights.
I'll take Josh's big fancy data and make it, useful. Spoiler alert. Not everything works, but I'll keep it real with how it actually plays out in ministry.
That's right. We believe listening isn't just a skill, it's a sacred tool.
So let's talk about what happens when listening leads the way.
This is the Future of Faith.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Future of Faith podcast. I'm Keedren Boston.
And I am Josh Packard.
Listen, we've talked about a lot of great things this season, and we're going to keep it going because I think the thing we're going to talk about now is very crucial.
And we've been telling you what to do.
Right. But now we're going to tell you what not to do when it comes to listening. All right. The top 5 things, and we might even have a bonus one in there,
We got a bonus one at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Things not to do when listening.
And this comes straight, I think it's important people know, this comes straight from the research. So we ask people not just sort of like, how is your faith deepened, or what conveys respect and honor to you? We also ask them okay, how do you know when somebody's not listening?
Right.
Give us the dirt. What are the small tells? What are the signs that somebody's not paying attention?
Right. We're definitely curious about that. Right. And so what I want to do is we're going to dive straight to the one of the interviews. This gentleman, Steven, actually shared this. He says, if I'm worried, I'm not feeling accepted, or I'm feeling judged, I'm definitely going to avoid certain aspects of a conversation, right? It'd be a conversation, but this conversation would lack substance.
So that first one then is don't judge.
Don't judge, right? Yeah. And this gentleman, because when that happens, especially for him, and I can relate to that, feels like this is going anywhere. We're still talking, but now I'm checked out, and this is not going to be as substantive as it could be.
And I love that this concept that I think is really critical here is that I'm going to withhold parts of myself. I'm not going to show up here with my whole self to this. I mean, and this is not brand new. This is nothing about 2025 that makes this true. This is as true as people. I mean, in fact, years ago, I was doing some research for this book that I wrote called Church Refugees, about people who leave church but keep their faith. They just can't take the institution anymore. Mm-hmm. One of the things that they said there was they want a community, but they got judgment. And judgment for them was the antithesis of community. You couldn't have community if you had people judging, because what they said was well, then I'm just not going to bring that part of myself to this group. And if there are parts that I have to leave at home, then this isn't really community.
That's good, man. That hits different.
Yeah.
But it's true. It rings true. Yes, sir. What else we have?
All right. Number 2. So the first one, try to listen without judgment. It's very hard. We know. Number 2 of what not to do. Do not give advice unless it is asked for. And I think, look, this can be we've talked about this before. What would make somebody's life better. That is not a question. Their life would be better if they did X, Y, and Z, or if they stopped doing A, B, and C or whatever. But man, it is such a turnoff, people said, and that not only are they not going to listen to you, but it is also going to distance themselves from you. And nobody puts it better than Jonathan, 46-year-old, in our interview. He says, there are a lot of people that when they listen, they will be more apt to give you a solution wrapped up in an opinion, which is, oh, you should do this. And so they're just shooting all over you. That's so funny.
That's hilarious, man.
And that is what it feels like. I've been in that. You've been there.
I have.
I'm trying to tell you how I feel about something, and you're telling me what I should do. I'm not asking for you to solve this problem. I might in the future, but you're just telling me, oh, you should do it. If you looked at blah, 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 if you read this book, and it does just feel like you're being shoulded all over.
Right. Help us. That's real, man.
That doesn't mean that I think, the point here is not that you shouldn't try to help people. You should, but you need to understand when it's being asked for. So actually to that point, then Daria, another one of these interviews, she's 27 years old. white woman. She says, something that I really like when people do, and it's usually with closer friends. But if I'm talking to somebody and like venting, I really like it when people say, okay, do you want me to just hear you, or are you looking for advice? I feel like that's always a good question to ask, because I don't always know what I'm looking for either. But it just makes me feel like this person is appreciating what I'm saying. And I love that, like, Daria breaks it into like very black and white, very simple terms. Like, you can just be that upfront about it. You can just say, like, look, I'm here. Like, what did you say earlier? Maybe it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, when you're like, my ear is here. I'm happy to sit here and listen. I'm very curious about you. And I'm not just like a wall that you're talking to, but I'm genuinely interested. But I also want to make sure that if what you're looking for is advice, that I'm fulfilling that for you too, because I've got some thoughts. But if not, cool. Like, you can be that right up front about it.
Yeah, that's wisdom, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I really thought that was some good insight from Daria. So you don't have to just shit all over people.
Right.
You gotta ask them.
Ask them.
Ask them, for consent before you shit on them. Okay, we should stop. All right.
Man.
The first one is try to listen without judgment. The second one is don't give advice until it's asked for. What do we got for number 3, Keedren?
The third one is don't interrupt. Let them finish. Right? Don't interrupt. Let them finish. There's nothing like being mid-thought, trying to share with someone, and they cut you off to tell you what they think, or what you should have, right? What you should have done. But when you are interrupted, man, it just I feel devalued. Like, I feel you don't value what I'm saying, or you don't want to hear what I'm saying, or you're trying to rush me through.
Yeah, it does feel like you're trying to be. That is exactly, like, I often stop and start sentences a lot, and I have probably longer than usual pauses than other people, because my wife will tell me all the time, she's like, the reason why you get interrupted all the time is because people think you're done talking.
Good point, right?
Well, like, okay, I can own some of that, but that is how it makes me feel. I'm like, why are you trying to hurry this up? Like, you got someplace to be that,
right?
Yeah.
Do we have the time for this? Because that matters. And I may ask people too, and I know people ask me too, and I'm honest if I do have the time. You have a moment? Yes, I do. I mean, is this something quick, or is it something I need to, like, really, you need me? You're going to have my undivided attention. But if we need to reschedule, or if we need to schedule it in, I got you, so we can spend time together, because I don't rush you, But no, it won't take it won't take a long time. Okay, cool. Right. But at least I'm communicating with them to make sure that I have the time, especially if they're asking me, if it's, sometimes I have 3 or 4 people that are waiting to talk to me.
You got to triage that. Like,
yeah, seriously.
Who just needs to know what room we're moving to? Okay, I can do that.
Right. And so, but anyway, you want to make sure you have the time to be able to hear them in that way, because if you don't, you're going to end up, or you're more likely to try to rush them through or interrupt. And then I think, you could speak to this too, and you let me know what you think about it. When I've interrupted people, sometimes, it's been my wife or my children, somebody that I know well, because maybe I'm assuming that I know what they're about to say. So I'm going to, or I heard the story, or whatever, I heard a different perspective, and then I do that, which is not right either. But what would you say to that? Do you think that's a cause of the interrupting too sometimes, where you think you already know what's
Well, I think a genuine apology goes a long way. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, please finish. Like, I didn't mean to jump in. Yeah. I don't think you have to explain. I don't think you have to be defensive, but I think a genuine apology goes a long way. But, like, as you were talking about this, Keedren, too, I was thinking about not just one-on-one, but in group settings. Sometimes, and you mentioned this with circle time that you were describing in one of the earlier episodes, where, like, you've got a bunch of kids in a room going around answering a question. Like, we need to move here. Like, we don't have forever. Like, I'm here to listen, but, like, Lord of the Fly style, like, you can't hold conch shell forever. And I think one of the really smart things that you mentioned about how you do that is that you, instead of calling somebody out in the moment or leaving it up to the whim of whoever's in charge, you have some ground rules. You're like, okay, everybody, like, we know, are some ground goals, not rules.
Yeah.
We all know what we're trying to do here, right? Mm-hmm. So if I gently nudge you on, it's not because it's not because what you have to say isn't important, but we also have this uppermost value of making sure everybody gets heard. And it's my job, my role here as the facilitator to make sure that happens. So
For sure. Yeah.
proactive in that way in a group setting, I think like that can go as far as an apology can in an individual setting.
I agree. Yeah. And usually in those settings too, it's mostly the adults that are doing most of the talking, so
Yeah.
I'm like, let's just reevaluate how we're doing. If we find ourselves talking more than
the
just
kids are actually totally good at it's the adult. Yeah, for sure.
right. Because it's that mindset too. Like I need to give them something,
Yeah.
Anyway. And I think that's where the interruption comes too. You need to know real quick how I can fix this. But anyway.
All right, number 4. I think this presents it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
God knows it's a challenge, and it's an opportunity, and it's all about the phone.
Mm-hmm.
The phone. What people said in the interviews, they told us in the surveys that, look, if you want me to feel like you're not listening, you just keep glancing at your phone every once in a while. Like now, so that is clearly a challenge because sometimes there's very mission critical things that can happen on our phones, or at work, if it's during work hours, or if there's, if you're the person at work that's in charge of handling emergencies, like my wife is, she's got to have the Apple Watch on, if there's ministry happening on site and, and it's her day to be the person that's in charge of solving problems, she's got to have it on. But, so it can be a challenge for sure. Mm-hmm. And plus just the addictive nature of these things. I mean, they light up, there's notifications, blah, blah, blah. But I think the real opportunity is that people conversely have told us that it goes a really long way when you sit down and you make a show of like, say, hey, I want to make sure that you have my undivided attention here. I'm just going to turn off my phone real quick or I'm going to put it in my bag or whatever and say like, there are some things that I need to be paying attention to. So in about 20 minutes, if you wouldn't mind that if we could just take a break and check our phones make sure that there's something that's like on fire and then go right back to this.
Yeah.
So I think there's an opportunity there to like convey value
right
person without, having to like be completely out of touch for forever.
For sure. That's good. And I think that's a good proactive approach. I've done that, with students and adults. Like even if I've had the questions on my phone, I'll let them know, hey, I do have questions here, but I would set my phone.
I love that. That's smart. Like I've got some stuff written down here I wanted to follow up with you about, but so if I'm looking at my phone, it's for that. But
right. And that way you give them that insight, and then sometimes I'll set my phone under my chair, and I'll listen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like you say, just being like giving that insight and that foresight, like the proactive about what you're doing and why you're doing it. We even put into our guidelines that we won't have our cell phones out so we can give each other undivided attention, know. But I like the point that you said, like, let's check on, like, we'll check on our phone just in case nothing is burning.
Yeah.
Like, there's still value. Now, we get that. Like, this the world that we're in the age of technology. But also we do want to make this feel like, we want to make everybody feel like they're heard. And we don't want anybody to feel like either of us are tapped out, any of us are tapped out.
And I do part of it, and we can move on, but there is this like fine line with kids sometimes, I think, especially where, the idea of a kid sitting across from you and having like a deep, eye to eye conversation can be super intimidating. Like sometimes you have to know the situation. You talked about this, like discern what this person needs. Like if they need to talk to you while they're playing Candy Crush, or whatever games kids play, like scrolling through TikTok or whatever, because it's too intimidating to like just sit there and they don't have the skill set for it yet. That you got to know that and understand it.
I agree.
It might actually be disarming for them. But generally speaking, don't look at your phone.
I agree. We going to the next one?
Yeah, number 5.
Number 5 is don't make assumptions or jump to conclusions.
Don't make assumptions.
Man.
Well, I feel like this one's really hard, yeah?
Yeah. And when we think about it, right, when we're someone that has information, that has a relationship with the people that we are connected to, that we're leading in that community, we may know some background information. Yeah. We may have some insight about what's happening, even when they share with us, and I've been in those situations pretty much, I mean, all the time, but I still make time to listen and hear their perspective, to hear their point of view. And because I might miss something. I do it with my wife, and I always say, like, I need to listen a little longer, right? Because kid told me this, right? And you're saying this. Like they told me and you about the same situation, but let me just see what they told you. You know what I mean? And so listening a little longer and not making assumptions or jumping to conclusions is very important. But listening a little longer.
Well, and the thing here that that this brings that like I have to keep in mind is that part of what happens when you listen is that you get information about somebody's life. And you're right. So maybe you misunderstand something, but even when you are certain that you understand it, remember that the other thing that's happening with listening is that the person who's talking is working something out.
That's good.
And so just because you think you understand it, and maybe you do,
you
think that the project is over, right? Like the person who's talking, and this is what we heard in the data, is like I'm talking to try and understand how I feel or think about this thing.
Yeah.
And you're also, when you interrupt them, when you don't let them finish and jump to conclusions, you're also missing an opportunity to bring them closer to God, as we've seen, to create this sacred experience in the other data. So there's a lot of good reasons for understanding that, yeah, maybe let's pause, let's take a beat, let's let them, let's not assume that I know what's going on here.
For sure. Yeah. Ask a question.
Yeah. All right, that's the top 5, right? Okay. Don't judge. Don't give advice unless it's asked for. Don't interrupt. Don't look at your phone. Don't make assumptions. 5 don'ts. Okay. Those are all like pretty clear in the data, Keedren, but there was one more that keeps coming up anecdotally. So this is our bonus tip.
Okay.
That it wasn't like we didn't ask about it in the survey because we didn't think to. It keeps people wrote it in to the open-ended question. On the surveys where you could like fill in like other, and then you could fill in. People wrote it in. People brought it up in the interviews. And so number 6, the bonus tip here is don't laugh. Don't laugh.
And that's, wow. I'll let you share, but I have a story about it.
So the thing that was so like, I'm so guilty of this because like what's happening on my side as a listener is that I'm so locked into what you're saying that it's like bringing up these other memories for me of when that has happened to me. I'm like, oh man, like that does suck. Like I've been there. It's like, oh, that time in my life, that was awful. And so I'm chuckling about that, but the way it gets interpreted is that I'm laughing at them.
Yeah.
And so they're just like, there's unless somebody's making an explicit joke, is one of the more damaging things it seems like that you can do. Okay, but what's your story here?
I agree. Okay, man. So this was kind of like of course it was in our setting for Circle, and it definitely speaks to being focused and listening to the people who are actually talking, right? Giving them your attention. But what was happening, there's a portion in our, every Sunday, we always ask if they have prayer requests or praise report, right? Because we want to be able to pray with them on the things that they are concerned about, or they're believing God for, trusting God for. And we also want to know what God is doing in their lives, because I feel like it's important for them to understand, their testimony. Like what is God doing in your life that you want to share with other people? And we're here for that. And so one of our young men was sharing something that happened with a parent, right? And, God protected them, and if things were okay, but it was a scary moment.
Yeah.
Well, what was happening across the circle, another young man was laughing. I mean, laughing and laughing.
Like them?
No, well, that's what was assumed, right? That's what it felt like, right? But he was on the other side laughing at something that another kid said, right? They were talking about something totally different.
Totally unrelated, yeah.
Right? But this kid and his friends were like very offended. Like, how are you laughing at what happened to...
Traumatic experience.
Yes, that could have been bad, and you're laughing. So I end up, they end up sharing with me, have a conversation with them, because now there's a point where we have to reconcile. There's some restoration that needs to take place, because they're all in the same group. They're part of their mini community, right? And so I have a conversation, and I usually lead with a question: what happened? Right? And so your first young man shares and lets me know I was sharing about this and how God protected, my mom in this way. And then this young man, I asked him, I said, okay, I asked him what happened. Well, I was laughing at XYZ because they had said this, previously, and that's why I was laughing at. So I said, okay, so you hear what he said, or were you laughing? Were you laughing at what his mom would happen in his life as well? He was like, no, I didn't even hear that. So I said,
well, that's a problem.
That's a problem, right? That's a problem. So I said, well, that speaks to the point of, our guidelines to make sure that we are listening to each other, because now there's a misunderstanding. You don't think that's a funny thing, that happened, do you? No, I don't. I said, what do you think about that? I think that's scary. I think that, that I would be afraid if that happened, my mom, and so I'm asking him questions so this young man can hear what he actually thinks and what he actually feels about what was being said. But this young man's feelings was hurt at the beginning, and we got to the end of it to where he was like, okay, we're cool, and we've also got to the point of not, laughing and also paying attention, because that was the root of it. You weren't focused in on what was happening. Now, granted, they're sixth graders, right. But the laughing part really hurt, because it was like you were laughing at my pain. You were laughing at, even though the bad thing didn't happen because God protected my mom, right, but you were laughing at the situation in my mind, and it was a misunderstanding. And so people never know, what you're laughing at. Like you were saying, you may have said something that reminded me of something, in the past that was, that brought about this reaction, but I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at that. Right.
But that's a hard thing when somebody's being vulnerable like that. That's a hard thing to try and, you're better off not to have to deal with it at all. And just remember, like, keep that laughter buttoned up for now.
Yeah. And I will say this, there are some situations where it's no distraction. You're listening to them, and what they're saying may be funny to you. I mean, like, let's just be real. It's not a lot. I haven't had a lot of conversations, but maybe how it happened or what somebody said to them that hurt their feelings, or said to them, and this is whether it's a youth or adult, where it's that situation, I'm like, dang, that was wild. I'm not laughing at you, right? That's
wild that anybody would do that.
Right, but that can still be something that is hurtful, because now it's like, oh, you're in it with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. That's
it's just, I think that the lesson there is like, just think twice, right? It doesn't mean you can't be fun. It doesn't mean you can't, laugh when it's appropriate. Just know that could be a thing that it doesn't come across the right way. Yeah. Okay. So that gives us, 5 + 1. Yeah. Don't judge, don't give advice, don't interrupt, don't look at your phone, don't make assumptions, and don't laugh unless you're dead certain that it's a joke.
Right. That's good.
Certainly don't shit all over people.
Right. All right. Please don't.
We got 2 episodes left in this season. When we come back, we're gonna in the next episode we'll talk about the impact of listening beyond faith formation. What else happens when we sit and listen with somebody? And before we wrap up the whole season with some key takeaways. But this has been this whole middle chunk. You want to be relatable, you want to be reliable, you want to be curious, and then a series of things you don't want to do. So thanks everybody. We'll be coming back with you with some key takeaways about sort of what happens when you listen beyond faith formation.
You have been listening to the Future of Faith podcast, produced by Future of Faith with original music by me, Keedren Boston. You can learn more about the Sacred Listening Study and all the amazing things going on in relational ministry at www.futureoffaith.org. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, where we feature incredible ministries, sacred listeners, and cutting-edge research, all for free, delivered right to your inbox. Thanks for listening. This is the Future of Faith.